Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And welcome to the show. It's April 21, 2022. I'm going to say the year of our Lord, but if the Lord's got anything to do with 2022, I don't know how you believe. Anyway, excuse me. Oh, she sounds like she's in a bit of a mood again. I want to share some things with you, obviously. Number one, there is, for you political junkies, there is a debate tonight that you can watch between the Democratic candidates for the Senate. And that would be, of course, Fetterman, Lamb, and Kenyatta. They will be debating at 8 o'clock tonight. It'll be carried on WPXI, the NBC affiliate here. So, if you're serious and want to see these three up close and together, there they will be. Number two, I have started having anticipatory anxiety. Well, I've had it all my life, but on a new subject. Somehow, I can't get this guy out of my head, and he's as vile a resident in it as the former president was. And he is a man who wants to feed. I guess that word has multiple meanings. Succeed the former president. I'm talking about Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. By all indications, the one person other than Trump who could potentially secure the nomination on the Republican side next presidential election and win. He is Trump smarter or cleaned up, and in that regard, more dangerous. He's starting to make some moves that are hard to ignore. Not that I have been. I just haven't really spent any time talking about him. I was reading a piece in I think New York Magazine today that is correctly pointing out that some of the moves you're seeing DeSantis making are the exact kind of moves that any autocrat wannabe begins with. Like Viktor Orban in Hungary, who slowly and methodically tightened his grip over the institutions of that country, over both the private and public sectors. You are watching DeSantis attempt the same. He's gone totally, of course, anti-gay. We talked about that some yesterday, about how gay people who had enjoyed such a measure of sport triumph politically in recent years are now seeing, like abortion, that things won legislatively can disappear legislatively. And that there are many in this country who still cling to and hold the bigoted values that kept gay people in this country in the closet so long. DeSantis' most recent thing, the fight with Disney. I have loathed Disney for a long, long time, and I've told stories about having been forced by virtue of my position as a reporter to spend 1 week in the Magic Kingdom. And boy, it was an eye-opener. Because Disney runs its Magic Kingdom as an autocracy. And for someone like me, the experience was unsettling. So in this fight between Disney and DeSantis, I would normally shrug my shoulders, but unfortunately, I must take Disney's side in this because they are representative of something larger, and that is the private sector, corporations. Because DeSantis is showing what autocrats do. He is telling this huge corporation, hey, look, you criticize me? Because that was their crime. They criticized his latest anti-gay measure. I don't even know if it's the latest at this point. The Don't Say Gay bill. By the way, one of the few times that our side has won the naming sweepstakes. That is not the name of the bill, but our side labeled it as such, and it stuck. That's the kind of thing that Republicans are so good at that we are generally abysmal at. And the fact that it is now known as Don't Say Gay is fantastic. And Disney, belatedly, and with some pressure from consumers and others, came out and criticized that bill and said it would be suspending its normal hefty donations to Mr. DeSantis. Well, that was their crime. And so we are seeing that if you dare criticize or withhold support from the leader, the king, you will be targeted. You will be culled from the corporations who have done the right thing, and you will be held up as an example. You will be retaliated against in a clear act of vengefulness and in a clear showing that DeSantis takes criticism personally. And for the crime of having criticized a bill, Disney, as you know, is now targeted by the entire right-wing media sphere. Accused of, well, the usual crime of anyone who's not on their side, of pedophilia and grooming of children. So I just want to point this out. Who knew that Disney was a land unto itself, really? The Magic Kingdom was legally its own kingdom. This is what we're learning because he's threatening to take that away from them. It's something they've enjoyed since they opened the Magic Kingdom's doors. But let us be aware that Ron DeSantis who is selling what some people call competent Trumpism, is a very dangerous man. And we'll be certainly dealing with more of him. I just haven't really wanted to even go there, but I find him a frightening thing on the horizon. There's so much always that's coming at us in this crazy world we're living in now that, you can fail to spend time trying to see ahead, which I always recommend trying. I mean, it's how I drive. I'm always amazed at people who don't drive that way, that they only see as far as what? I guess their windshield. I don't know. In order to drive wisely, you're taking in a lot of stuff ahead of you and peripherally and reacting to it. It's like the people who are in a lane where you can see there's a parked car or truck on a 2-lane, it's 2 lanes going in the same direction. And man, I'm always amazed at how they drive right up to it and then look befuddled. Oh dear, what's this thing doing here? Now I'm going to have to try to get into the other lane, and all those people who apparently were looking ahead and switched lanes before me. I don't know. I never have understood the way some people drive in a sort of state of just totally inattentively. Of course, we're hearing that is more and more of a scourge, and people are dying as a result. At any rate, another little thing I came upon today, and this allows me to remind myself to recommend to you a news source that if you are not using and supporting, you are, I would say you're wrong. And that is called Public Source, publicsource.org. This exists in many lucky locales. It employs excellent reporters, puts out excellent local reporting, and puts it out on the internet and gives it to you free, although they're constantly saying, if you don't give us some money, we're not going to be able to keep this up. So I am a contributor to Public Source, and it is now more than almost any other source of my local news. It is my biggest source of local news is publicsource.org. If you haven't encountered it, please do so. They're doing really, really wonderful work. I just want to direct you to a piece today regarding Pittsburgh Public Schools and what its employees make, because this really blew my mind. It blew my mind in the same way that I once had my mind blown by finding out that the highest paid public employees in almost every state of the union are college, either football or basketball coaches at State's University, because they make millions and millions, and they are public employees. And I thought, wow. Every once in a while, there's just like one thing that crystallizes how corrupted our value system is. And that's one. Now, this blew me away too, because It says here that the Pittsburgh Public Schools spend at least $303 million a year. At least they did last year on paying people who work for them. The median income of all of their employees is about $63,000 a year, that's good. That's pretty impressive. But here's the thing that sort of blew me away. 830 employees of Pittsburgh Public Schools made more than $100,000. 830. This is, paid by the beleaguered taxpayers of Pittsburgh, that don't include the people that have all the money, like UPMC and the colleges. Excuse me for screaming. It's all the poor people who live in the city. So 830 Pittsburgh Public School employees, and you can find their names in the database. It's unbelievable. More than 100,000. Now, who are they? So you want to, that's the next question. It's sort of like, finding out that, the football coach is the highest paid state employee. Well, the superintendent, number one. And, he isn't even here anymore. Anthony Hamlet, sort of left under a bit of a cloud, to say the least. He made $229,000 and then some. Okay, but the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The next 12 highest paid employees of the Pittsburgh Public Schools know what their department is? Are they teachers? Are they administrators? No. They're maintenance people. Excuse me for screaming in your ear. Well, operations and maintenance. And so, let's see here. The next highest paid person is a guy named Kyle Vogt, V-O-G-T, the general foreman, and he made last year $221,000. Let's round it up, $222,000. You're a Pittsburgh resident, you paid him $222,000. He's followed by a poor soul who only raked in $212,000, and he's not a general foreman, he's a coordinating foreman. That's Matthew Constance. Then we got an electrician who made $202,000. The next job descriptions, also making big six figures, they're all white guys too, you can tell. I'm sorry, I'm assuming white just from some of the names, which isn't right, but I'm assuming. There's a black guy in here somewhere. God knows there ain't a woman, but whatever. Okay, here are the other guys that you're paying these huge bucks to. Steam fitter foreman, electrician, plumber foreman, the sheet metal foreman. Here's a mere steam fitter. He's not a foreman at all. And what's amazing about some of these guys, like the plumber guy, he didn't even start working. It's not like tenure got him. He's been there so long that, no, he didn't start working for Pittsburgh Public Schools till 6 years ago. And he made $172,000. Who knew? I'm telling you. This is where you want to work if you have one of these trades. Sheet metal worker, 161,000. Oh, here's a woman. I got my first woman. Oh, and she's not, and she's a chief of staff. Okay, and she came in at number 14. And I think she's black, too. Okay, so to me, that's mind-blowing. And then if you look at also how these guys made their money, not that they wouldn't, some of them been over in six figures, it's overtime. $72,000 in overtime. Now, when people are making overtime like that, what does it tell you? I don't think that makes any sense. I don't know. I've never run anything. But it suggests to me that you don't have enough employees to do the job and not pay overtime rates to a few. And then up again, after you got that one black woman who gets in there, there's 4 people, including an assistant superintendent, that get into the top money makers. And then we're back to carpenter, sheet metal worker, carpenter. And then it stops. I'd have to go to the full day. So I'm not saying that a carpenter shouldn't be highly paid, or an electrician or a plumber. And God knows our schools need to, have their physical selves functioning. But something's wrong here. A teacher on the list. Let's talk about the teachers. Again, this is publicsource.org. Give them $10 a month if you can, or more if you can. Pittsburgh School District, 86% of the teachers are white. Now that's interesting, because I don't know, what is the black population of the school district? It sure ain't 14%, which would, 86% of our teachers are white, 70% are female, and the majority of them earn between $90,000 and $120,000 per year. According to the union negotiated pay schedule they have, it takes about 11 years to start earning the maximum base salary of $99,000. And where do all these white women who teach in all the little black children in the Pittsburgh schools live? They live not in Pittsburgh. The most popular zip codes for teachers are Ross Township, Allison Park, Coraopolis, Bethel Park, and Pleasant Hills. And there's more and more. Which schools have the best paid teachers? Which schools have the worst paid teachers? Blah, 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 blah. And also, according to a note by the reporter who compiled this interesting stuff, a guy named Oliver Morrison, he is the K through 12 education reporter for Public Source. And this is interesting. It says before he became a journalist, he taught school. He was a teacher of English and drama in Arkansas for 7 years. Boy, Oliver, nice piece. So I just want to, please check that out. And also, and I'm not here ragging on teachers making money. They should be paid money. But I'm saying that all of these tradespeople making those huge bucks, second only to the superintendent, does not make any sense to me. Just like it didn't make sense to me that the football coach would be the highest paid. But then I hold on to some of my naivete. I haven't said much about Ukraine or Putin lately, and it's so upsetting. Those poor Ukrainians holed up in the steel mill in Mariupol. The Russians, for the first time wisely, are not going to lose any of their soldiers attempting to take that facility. They're just going to surround the place and starve them out. Perhaps even more brutal. There's a video making the rounds of Putin telling his defense secretary to do this. And unlike other Putin videos we've seen, this one, somebody must have talked to him, obviously. He's sitting across a normal sized table from the defense secretary. The defense secretary is not 500 feet away from him. Although the body language is fascinating. It's a picture's taken from the side, and the defense secretary is literally sitting on the edge of his seat. You can see almost the entire seat of the chair he is in. Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, has taken up his, and you cannot see the seat of his seat. He's not only sitting totally back, he seems to have collapsed into his suit so that it appears he has no neck. And in fact, it appears his spine has caved in as well. It is a very odd posture. Nothing moves on Putin. Nothing. Nothing moves but his lips. And the other odd thing is his hand, his right hand, is literally clutching the edge, the corner right edge of the table, like holding it. And I'm doing that now. I'm trying to sit like he sat. And it's a very odd, unusual, weird. It just doesn't feel right. Now, some people have said, including doctors, who say, I know I can't really do this, but I'm just going to throw it out there, that this is the kind of thing that somebody with Parkinson's disease might do, so that his hand not shaking, which is possible. Also, if he does have Parkinson's, it could have some, possibly explain some of his sort of erratic and unwise, aggressive behavior. But I'm just saying, that's nothing but, social media, Twitter, twaddle, Twitter twaddle. Okay. Here's another thing I want to point. These are all, I'm sorry, it's Thursday, which is my mopping up day. I'm not going to say we, but I suspect some of you as well, are constantly decrying the danger we're seeing to our democracy. And I think it is probably long past time that we acknowledged that technically we don't have one and never did. And this is something we have talked about. We have this thing called a republic. And while it has obvious democratic values, it is not a true democracy, one person, one vote. Our republic has given more power to certain people, certainly from day one, when it was only white men who had any power at all. And while that's been opened up somewhat, the structure of our government also is not necessarily democratic. And it's functioned pretty well, obviously. We have, as a nation, tended to progress slowly, very slowly, then we regress a little, then we progress a little. But that also was something the founders did. They sort of baked in this very sort of stultified structure in which action was difficult. And it was because they were a little leery of democracy and of a mob. Yeah, they were. And I understand that because we're living it now. So I came upon this some time ago, and I've never found a way to get this in, that the way our country is set up, that we never really, even when we elect a president, as we know, it's not a democracy, because the presidents we have had up until Joe Biden, all the Republican presidents in recent history have lost the election, but they garnered the prize, the Oval Office, through this thing called the Electoral College. Now, a true democracy wouldn't have such a thing. And the Electoral College is one of the ways that Republicans have managed to have power, because left to the voices and votes of the people, they would not on a national scale. So I came upon this picture, and it's a picture of it's a picture of North and South Dakota. And giving the populations, turns out South Dakota is a little more populated. Neither has even 1 million people living in it. But South Dakota has about 814,000 people, and North Dakota has 672,000 people. Now, I want to remind you that if you put those two together, that population of under 2 million people has 4 senators. Each state gets 2. So they have 4 senators. And we can, of course, assume those are 4 Republicans. This is how Republicans, again, have the advantage, because of the structure that this not democracy of ours provides. And then I'm looking at a picture of the island of Manhattan, which is, not even a city of its own. It is a little borough, I believe they call it. But it's it's just a part of our largest city in the country, New York City. And this map just takes that island and sort of cuts it in half, South Manhattan and North Manhattan. And you know what? South Manhattan, according to their map, has the same population as South Dakota. And North Manhattan, and they actually didn't take all of it. They had to stop before they got to the tippy top. They come up with the 672,000 that is commensurate with North Dakota. So North Manhattan and North Dakota, they have this sort of the same population, and South Manhattan and South Dakota. Those are human beings. Those are Americans. They do not get equal representation in the Senate of the United States, a Senate that we might remind ourselves has managed to pack the Supreme Court in a very undemocratic-like way and politicized it. So the island of Manhattan, even though it far exceeds the population of either one of the Dakotas, plus a number of other states, does not get 2 senators. And so a document, that'd be our sacred Constitution, that we're always supposed to somehow worship, I think increasingly, clearly, is standing in the way of most Americans' ability to have our voices count. America is not a real democracy. It's certainly not a representative democracy. And it is burdened. And that burden of having to live within the limitations of a document created in the 1700s by a bunch of white guys, granted, some brilliant white guys, but in a different time, in a different place, and for different reasons at the time, is not working for us now. Okay, I've been wanting to say that. And then there's something, again, that I want to tell you to try to read. It's very long and it is important. In the time remaining to me, I will give you a few little snippets of it. But it is a piece in the Atlantic. And it is titled, Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid. And then it flat out goes and it delivers. I mean, again, it's a long read, but it tells us. It can't tell the whole story, but it certainly points us in some directions of what has happened just in the last decade to make America more stupid. And they start with a metaphor, the Tower of Babel. Because Babel, initially, everybody spoke the same language, right? So they could communicate with each other. And then the Tower of Babel, I guess God did that, right? Or I'm no biblical scholar. He said, it says here that God said, come, go down and confuse their language so they will not understand one another's speech. And so we get the Tower of Babel, which I always, as a kid, assumed was spelled B-A-B-B-L-E. And why it isn't, I don't know. Or did that term come from B-A-B-E-L? But the author of this piece, Jonathan Haidt, says that it's that story of Babel that he thinks is the best metaphor for what has happened to us. Because it is true. We used to sort of speak the same language. And now we don't. I mean, we really don't. It's maybe been 6 years since I started tentatively saying things like, what's happening to us? What's happened? We don't even speak the same. We don't even agree on the same fact. We don't, right? I mean, it took a while to acknowledge what had happened. Well, it was and it had, and it continues to was and had, is and had. We're cut off from one another. And needless to say, it's destabilized everything. Americans feel disoriented, frightened. None of this is good, of course. Because when a people get this mixed up and confused and can't even agree that up is up and down is down, well, that's when people like Ron DeSantis move in. Don't you trouble your pretty little heads. I'm going to tell you what's going on. You just don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. I'm the big daddy. I know you're feeling unsafe. Don't worry about it. We'll feed you some scapegoats to distract you. You just keep looking at all those trans people and thinking about ladies' bathrooms, and we're going to So the piece, so what's the Tower of Babel saying was a metaphor in our world? It's the internet. It's social media, the internet. And it has transformed humanity. Not just us, because you see this same disorientation in other countries. You see it globally. There was another good piece I read about how, the culture wars, it is now like a global phenomenon, because this is what the internet was made for, to sow that kind of division. It might not have been what the internet was originally made for, but boy, if the inventors of it been able to think ahead and been schooled in human psychology, they might have been able to figure out that they had unleashed something that would do an awful lot of damage. I mean, initially when, Facebook and all that, it was, isn't this wonderful? Look at this. You can stay in touch with people like that. It's just wonderful. And then there was the Arab Spring, which showed how this marvelous tool can be used to democratize the world. It gave little people power. Yeah. For a little while. And in fact, quite the opposite of the Tower of Babel. We really felt that we were finally, the whole world could come together. According to this author, wow, we had effectively overcome the curse of division by language. Well, 10 years later, Facebook and Twitter and all the others have really changed everything. And this guy goes on to say, you know, how do societies stay together? How do nations stay together? Well, if you look at, we got to look at history. You rely on shared beliefs, common enemies, often shared blood, nationalism, shared religion, gods. But what holds together such a diverse polyglot, a secular so-called democracy like the United States? Well, people who look into this say pretty much probably three things. There has to be extensive social networks with high levels of trust. There have to be strong institutions with high levels of trust. And there have to be shared stories that touch us all. And there is no doubt that all three of those things are on life support in this country in 10 years. And I'm skipping over stuff here, but he ends up saying that, when Facebook offered to publicly like something with a click of a button, and Twitter offered with a click of a button to retweet something that you like, and then Facebook copied that with their share button. That was the beginning of the trouble. One of the engineers at Twitter who had worked on the retweet button always later, revealed that he so regretted inventing it because it had clearly made Twitter an uglier place, because he watched as Twitter mobs formed through this new tool. Just a little button here. Retweet. Share. And he said he thought to himself, oh God, we might have just handed a 4-year-old a loaded weapon. And that is when the mobs started together. The mobs that our founding fathers were so worried about, that they created this cumbersome constitution which would prevent, any quick changes when people were like, in a mob mentality. But look now, mob mentality, we're in 3 or 4 different mobs a day if you're on social media. And then, of course, social media companies realized that by stoking this, they made more money by creating algorithms that caused greater division, greater separation, the ability for constant bias confirmation. Well, see, everybody's thinking like I am. You see, look at there's that. And then there's this. And then there's that. And we all got put in our little silos. I watched it happen a little earlier with talk radio. I have this wistful memory of when I did talk radio in the earlier years of such fascinating conversations because we hadn't been put in bubbles yet. We were still talking to each other respectfully, mostly respectfully. And so my show then was this wonderful, I used to say it was akin to the town hall. You know, everybody gets to speak and get heard. And then little by little, the capitalists who ran the radio stations started to see that there was this one format, was Rush Limbaugh, that seemed to really attract people and really worked really, really well. And so a lot of stations went looking for like little Rush Limbaugh wannabes, and man, they came out of the woodwork. And radio stations that had talk began hiring these people, and pretty much talk became not this town square, but a right-wing, rage-inducing disinformation bubble. And so I now, for years, have been left essentially with an audience of people who agree with me. And I got to tell you, as much as it's nice to be in an audience with, having an audience of people who agree with me, it sure doesn't make as good a show. And it puts us in the same loop that is not conducive to thoughtful discussion. What we do here on a daily basis, practically, is confirmation bias, in large part. We all agree. Yippee-ki-yo, aren't we bright? Aren't we smart? Aren't they awful? And yeah, that's how we traffic now. That's how we ride. Very few people have managed to avoid this crap. And those who have don't get listened to. Excuse me, what are you doing? Are you suggesting that there's nuance? Are you suggesting there are some gray areas? So it's so obvious what's happened to us. And I don't know, I really don't know how we get out of it. How do we get out of it? Regulation of social media seems to be a starter, but you see how well regulation of guns, if we go back to that metaphor of, oh my God, we've handed a loaded gun to a 4-year-old. Yeah, well, in this country, sure you do. What's wrong with a 4-year-old having a loaded gun? This article talks about a study called Hidden Tribes. And it was a study done of 8,000 Americans about 5 years ago, and how they it stuck them into 7 categories that they could, that they gleaned. And the furthest category to the right, they called devoted conservatives, and the category to the left, they called progressive activists, okay? And the devoted conservatives, that they comprise 6% of the 8,000 Americans that they studied. And the progressive activists, 8% of the population. And you know where I'm heading here. 6% and 8% at the two extremes. And yet those are the voices that are heard. In fact, they found that it was progressive activists that were the most prolific group on social media, followed by devoted conservatives. And the thing is they found that those two groups on the far right and the far left were very much alike in many ways. Of all the 7 groups, those two extreme groups and minorities groups were the whitest and the richest. Ain't that interesting? The whitest and the richest and the loudest. And so the author says, it sort of suggests, doesn't it, that America is being torn apart by a battle between two subsets of the elite who are obviously not representative of the broader society. And what's more, these are two groups that within them show the greatest homogeneity in their political attitudes and in their moral attitudes. These are two groups that engage in thought policing. It's why they have this homogeneity. And so if we're looking for a way to come back together, we ain't going to do it by amplifying those extreme voices. It's why I have to tell you, I would not be in that extreme group. I'd probably be in the one next to it. Because I have a lot of difficulty with the progressive activists as they are defined in this study. As I've said many times, I don't care where it's coming from, the left or the right. I don't take kindly to anybody telling me I can't say something, think something, anything. I don't like censorship or the threat of censorship that begets self-censorship, that creates climate of fear, retaliation. You got Ron DeSantis with his type of cancellation and retaliation, right? And you got the lefties who want to cancel anybody who, I don't know, says the wrong word or pronoun. And I say to both of them, well, I won't. I was going to say a bad word. You're both of the same cloth. Okay, I'm done. I see my clock's done. Hey, check that piece out if you're in for a serious read. I didn't even get halfway through that. I mean, and I was just going over whole pages. It's The Atlantic, Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid. And it's by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. I want to thank Jonathan for originally sending it to me. But it's good. I think I tweeted it out if you follow me on Twitter. Okay? And I suppose we can put it on our site, I hope. I don't know if some of these things you can click on and you can't get to them. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you so much. And I guess we're going to have I'm going to be complaining Monday at how hot it is. Just to, shake things up a little bit. Okay? Have a good weekend, because mine starts now. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.